sky. To whom do these celestial steeds belong? When you appear to us like gods on high, which brings you here to mystify.
Hi, and welcome to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Today, my good friend and noted New York psychic, Fahrusha, is back with us. A few weeks back, Fahrusha explained the basics of remote viewing, and she's here today to tell us how it might apply to viewing very remote objects such as the moon. The moon has a lot of stories of alien bases, and while talking about the moon, we were also discussing how the moon itself is a very, very strange satellite and has a lot of mysteries associated with it, in addition to it possibly having some of the alien bases. So it was such an interesting discussion that I asked Fahrusha to come on the show again to continue that discussion. So welcome back, Fahrusha. Thanks for taking the time to be here.
Hey, Kate. Nice to be here with you.
Oh, always a pleasure. But just in case somebody missed the remote viewing show, can you give us just a brief description of what remote viewing is?
Remote viewing is really a protocol for clairsentience, particularly clairvoyance. Okay? Clairvoyance is being able to see something that is not in your actual field of vision, see something mentally. Now, there are different forms. You can smell something, you can taste something, you can hear something that's not an immediate auditory or sensory clue, okay? So you're not getting it through your senses, you're getting it without your senses. Now, remote viewing particularly is a protocol, which means it is a method or almost a ritual in some cases of getting more clairvoyance happening for the individual. However, remote viewing is generally done in some form of a group. You can do remote viewing by yourself, but you don't have anything to help you or to verify. So it's better done as part of a group. Remote viewing was formulated at the Stanford Research Institute in the 70s, I believe, the end of the 70s, by Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ.
Okay, so it's sort of an ability that can be not so much learned, but I would say sharpened, I guess. And it seems that some people just learn it a little bit more easily.
I would agree with that. I think that practice definitely helps. Mm-hmm. I had a blind target the other day that is mailed to me, and people, make comments on it on the internet if they want to. But I just have these blind targets mailed to me, and I focus on them when they come in by email. I just kind of concentrate on it, and this just gives you an example of what it's like. And all I could see was a bunch of colorful balloons against the blue sky. Mm-hmm. And, what that is called an AOL. It means that you've made up your mind about what the thing is before you actually see it, which is probably a bad idea. You're supposed to give characteristics, like I should say color blue, for sky blue color, round objects floating, rather than colorful balloons on a blue sky, because that's naming it, okay? Mm-hmm. And when I clicked on the picture to find out what it was a group of grapes in the upper corner hanging into the blue sky, but it certainly wasn't balloons. But one could say I wasn't exactly wrong, but I had made an analytic overlay, an AOL of the viewing target there.
Well, I think some people are just sort of naturals on it. And as you mentioned to me, Ingo Swann was one of the first people that just seemed to have this ability.
Well, I think that some people are natural psychics, or that their facility for decoding psychic material or remotely viewed objects just comes through a lot more clearly than other folks. However, the first and foremost thing that you have to remember about any kind of ability, psi ability, PSI ability, whether it be remote viewing or any other of a range of things, the first thing that you have to remember is that you have to believe it's possible.
Yeah.
It's just like, aeronautics. There were years and years and years where many people didn't believe it was possible to fly an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And or that to have an airplane be invented, or to go into space. Just believed it was impossible. If you believe something is impossible, you can't do it. And in terms of like a lot of the New Age stuff that you find around the bookstores and internet today about intentions and visioneering and envisioning your dreams and so forth, it is a big thing to believe that it's possible to become, say, a United States Senator, let's say. If you don't believe you can ever become a United States Senator, is it darn straight that you won't ever become a United States Senator. And you can just use it on very pragmatic matters like that. Mm-hmm. But if you believe that ESP is impossible, you're not going to experience it most of the time.
Okay. Well, I think you're right, because if you think you can't, then you won't. And
right.
That makes sense. But Ingo Swann seemed to could, and he almost seemed like he was reluctant to accept that. But I looked it up, and it seemed that, one of the interesting questions that one of our listeners brought up about UFOs several shows ago was, well, where do they park? Assuming they're not like sharks and swim 100% of the time, do they stop somewhere? And if they do, where is that? And, everyone's first thoughts are underwater, Antarctica, and then there's the dark side of the moon, since it's never visible from the Earth. And it seemed that Ingo Swann had quite an interesting remote viewing experience with that far side of the moon.
Absolutely. He has a book out called Penetration, I believe it is. And it details his experiences, and I think that it may be available on the internet as a download. It's a rather difficult book to get, I think, in a hard copy. Mm-hmm. Most of his books have been published and have gone out of publication, and if you look for them on the internet, they cost hundreds of dollars. It's really quite interesting. I own one of his books, which, if I wanted to sell it on the internet, I could probably pick up $100, but I think I'll keep it.
Well, he's probably something.
No, he has had remarkable experiences, out of body experiences with entities, and so forth. Now, the problem, we run into a dual problem here, Kate, as far as I can see. First of all, I can't comment too much on Ingo Swann's experiences because they are personal experiences, and they're not my experiences, so therefore I cannot verify them, and I also can't argue with them, and I don't see anything, I find it very interesting, and I urge everybody to read this book, Penetration, by Ingo Swann, but to comment on it like it's veracity, I can't do that, because it's his experience, and we can't really logically say if it's true or not. I mean, I'm not saying it's not true by any means at all.
But what is true is that the man is a gifted remote viewer. And what is also true is that he did see an alien base on the far side of the moon. And so, whether or not you can believe that's up to you. I tend to believe it, only because there's also always those hints from the astronauts that got covered up by NSA, or maybe they didn't get covered up, and it's a very, very interesting subject, and what I think that people who are interested in the moon in general should do, if you want to know about the moon, I think the first thing to do is to find out, like, facts about the moon. Just the facts that are commonly available. And then from there, move forward to seeing things that might be anomalous in moon photographs. I mean, let's say that to most people, remote viewing the moon is, even if it's possible, it's not probable.
in most people's experience. Most people that are listening right now are probably not going to sit down and learn to remote view to the extent that they're going to feel confident in their remote viewing of the moon. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, my advice, and this is something that I do myself, I try to, find out what seems to be verifiably factual about the moon, like the distance of the Earth to the moon, and, kind of visioning that in my mind, and the kind of stuff that is known about the moon that isn't argued, that isn't like propaganda for one side or the other, like it's not NASA covering up something, and it's not somebody's personal experience. Even my personal experience in viewing what I viewed on the moon, I hope that people would take it with an open mind. I don't expect them to, swear to God about it in a court of law, because they can't.
Okay, so in other words, they're not going to go out and say, I'm telling you, Fahrusha told me it was there, and so by gosh, it's there, right?
Exactly, but there are things that we can see about the moon which are absolutely...
so many things. So many things. Because, you never think about it. The moon's always there, so you sort of ignore it. But when you start reading, as you said, astronomy reports, NASA reports, and, nothing ultra, I mean, just actual facts. It is just unbelievable. The whole thing about the moon. If you haven't read anything recently, look it up again. Anyway, we're going to have to take a quick break. Kate Valentine, I am speaking with noted New York psychic Fahrusha. We are on 1160 WVNJ. If you have some thoughts on this subject, we'd love it if you'd share them with us. Post them now. AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. After the show, for more information, please go to Fahrusha's website, Fahrusha, FAHRUSHA.com, and her blog as well. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guest today is noted New York psychic and remote viewer, Fahrusha. What do you think about all this? Let us know. Place your thoughts now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. And Fahrusha, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and your website and your blog?
Well, my blog is Fahrusha.wordpress.com, and my regular website is FAHRUSHA.com. And they can reach me at Fahrusha@Fahrusha.com. So there you have it.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, we were talking about some odd facts about the moon.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah. And, I was just sort of perusing through the Internet, and I came across this one. In 1953, John O'Neill, an established astronomer and a respected one, observes a 19-kilometer-long bridge straddling the crater Mare Crisium. And following the report of his discovery to the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, he was subjected to verbal attacks. 1 month later, British astronomer Dr. H. Wilkins verified the sightings, and since then, they have seen other strange objects photographed.
Patrick Moore also, he was another astronomer who also backed up what John O'Neill saw. Basically, what we have here in the history, in a pre-space travel, basically before manned space travel, we have a history since before the discovery of the telescope, but primarily from the time of the discovery of the telescope up until the early 60s, of what is known primarily as transient lunar phenomena. And these are things that have been seen on the moon that disappear frequently. Some of it doesn't, and it is unexplainable. And some of it has been tried to be explained by crater impacts and gassing off beneath the moon. But that is a very hotly debated astronomical subject. Is the moon geologically active? That is not having to do with whether the moon has water or not, because water could be there without any further geological activity. But it's suspected that the moon could be gassing off and causing bright flashes of light and things that have been seen on the moon since the time of the astronomer Herschel, who is another astronomer who kind of almost lost his standing because of what he saw through his telescope. I guess it was about 200 years ago. I'm trying to see the exact date.
Yeah, late 1700s.
Right.
Well, and so much goes on. A friend of mine swears that she saw something fly across the face of the moon. And I said, well, maybe it was a plane going past and you saw it. And she said, no, it was on the moon. Because a plane will go across it and you'll see it, but then it goes right across it.
There are fast walkers and something called ELOs that are seen on the moon. And the problem with these things, in terms of really finding out what they are, is that they're not reproducible. You cannot see it again because you want to, if you're filming the moon nonstop, I guess you could play it back. But I don't know if anybody has an active filming, like video filming or digitally filming the moon on a constant basis. Maybe NASA does, but I'm not privileged to that information. Can we talk for a minute about the far side of the moon?
Yeah, please. That's the interesting part, sort of.
Well, there's a couple of things that we need to look for in photographs. First of all, I was told by another very famous remote viewer that if you know the coordinates of the stuff on the far side of the moon, if you can give out coordinates and you go to JPL, you can request photo images, which you pay, I believe he said this was some years ago, $12 for an image, but that may have changed by now, because originally NASA was supposed to be a non-military branch of the government, and I think officially still it is, which brings up all kinds of other stuff that we probably don't have time to go into today. But the far side of the moon, you supposedly can get pictures from the Jet Propulsion Lab.
Okay.
And so if you know what coordinates to ask for, you might find some highly anomalous things there. But if you try to go on the Internet and see pictures of the far side of the moon, there's a famous site called Lunascan, which I was going to make some sites available to people on your website. Afterwards, I'll send in an email.
Thank you.
But Lunascan is one of them, and if you go to their page on the back side of the moon, the far side of the moon, you supposedly click through to the images, but then the images aren't there. And I don't know what to say about that. Maybe they took them down, maybe they put something else there, the actual people who run the website. But time and again, you can go out looking for something on the far side of the moon and not find it. Which brings me to one of my bugaboos. One of my bugaboos about the moon is that people refer to the far side of the moon as the dark side of the moon. The dark side of the moon changes. Sometimes the dark side of the moon faces us because it's a shadow by the Earth of the sun on the moon. So the far side of the moon is not the dark side of the moon necessarily. That changes with the side which is dark changes with the rotation of the Earth and the moon.
Right.
Okay, because people always say that, and I have to just make a note of that. So in terms of the far side of the moon, there are a lot of stories. By stories, I do not mean they are untrue, but by stories, I mean that because they're people's personal experiences, they're very hard to verify. There are stories of a variety of different military personnel being shown things at JPL and then not wanting to look at them and their structures and so forth. There are so many of these stories that one begins to believe that there's something to it. Okay? This is just totally from not the point of view of a remote viewer, but just the point of view of an interested public.
Well, look at all the smoke. You figure there has to be a little fire.
Right, absolutely. And what to look for in a lunar photograph, if you happen to get your hands on one, and they're out there, what to look for in a lunar photograph are things that are geometrical, because geometry, precise, like circles and very straight lines and like exact equilateral triangles and things of this nature are generally not found in nature, okay? And the thing that we don't want to get overly excited about is like, say, something that looks like a rabbit on the moon or something that looks like a face, because there's something called pareidolia. The brain tends to take images that kind of look like something we know. It kind of looks like a giraffe, so it must be a giraffe on the moon. Probably not. But nothing is impossible, but, you have to step back when you start to see images of faces and people and so forth. It might not be what you think it is. But straight lines, triangles, architectural features, perfect circles, don't happen that much in nature.
Well, I mean, just as a description, I just pulled something out from Ingo Swann. And again, this is remote viewing. And he views whitish sand with some sort of repeated pattern, like rows of large tractor treads on the sand.
Right.
And he becomes confused when he senses something like an atmosphere. And at this point, he's given another set of coordinates. And he says, I'm in a place which is sort of down, like in a crater, a strange green haze, like a light. Beyond that, all around is dark. I'm wondering where the light's coming from. And then he said, yeah, what else? Well, you won't like this. I think I see actual lights, sort of like lights at football arenas, high up, banks of them, up on towers. Well, his handler was saying, not smiling, he says, well, I see lights. How can they be on the moon? Have the Russians built there? And then, this is a great point, but this stuff is big. Does NASA or even the Soviets have the capabilities of getting such large stuff to the moon? This was before the shuttle and so on.
Yes.
And then it starts to hit him what he's actually seeing. He goes, this is not ours. This is not made on Earth. And then finally he sees some kind of entities. And then, this is really interesting, after the entities turn around, they start to gesticulate in his direction. And then he said, immediately I felt like running away and hiding. And then he turned to the handler and said, these beings are psychic, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the remote viewer was getting viewed.
Yes, indeed. And that
had to be terrible.
That goes back,
as hell.
Strangely, and to my experience, which was much less detailed than Ingo Swann's experience, but my experience of, sort of like immediately viewing something, like sort of automatically viewing something when I was meditating about the moon, and then realizing I had been discovered.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. It was scary.
Identical, but mine was a lot less pointed. I spent a lot less time there. I didn't have a handler, I didn't have somebody to back me up there. But it is amazing. And what we have to think about, there are a couple of things that come to mind with what you said. First of all, that these beings do not have to be life as we know it. There can be life as we don't know it. It may be something that, is beyond our imagination to conceive of at the present moment. The other thing is that some of the things that Ingo saw are in some way verifiable, insofar as the tread marks. There are photographs of marks that look like tread marks on the moon. And I have seen those, and I will have to look to see if I can relocate them, but they're absolutely out there for viewing and undoctored photographs. And then there are also statements about photos of astronauts on the moon where illumination seems to be coming from a different source, and that's very argued about. People argue about the veracity of the moon landing. I believe the moon landings happened myself, but there are some photographs that appear to have an outside light source, which is not the sun or Earth reflection.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think there's a lot going on up there, and two, I'd like to. We're going to take a quick break again, but you mentioned we should really get into the Grail and the Grail landings and the fact that the moon may be hollow. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff.
There are really anomalous facts about the moon that are just facts,
Kate Valentine here. I'm speaking with the noted New York psychic, Fahrusha. We're on 1160 WVNJ. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Post them now at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. And after the show, please go to Fahrusha's website, Fahrusha, FAHRUSHA.com. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guest today is the noted New York psychic and remote viewer, Fahrusha. What do you think about all this? We'd love to know. Place your comments now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. And Fahrusha, after the show, how do they find out more about you and your work and your very, very interesting blog?
Well, my blog is Fahrusha.wordpress.com, and my website is Fahrusha.com, and I can be reached at Fahrusha@Fahrusha.com.
Well, I'll tell you, just over the break, we had a question that came in, was a little bit off topic, but I think a lot of people would be interested in it. Alex was wondering if you see anything in the near future, any events or sightings coming along in 2013.
Well, you mean UFO sightings in 2013?
Yeah, I don't want to know about the
I think that what I'm seeing happening in 2013 basically has to do with the comets that are supposed to be visible. Now, there will continue to be UFO sightings all around the world, and it will continue to get more and more difficult to tell what is a UFO sighting and what is some, man-made object. With all the drones floating around now, even private companies have drones, and it's going to make UFO spotting a lot more difficult to categorize. However, throughout the ages, comets have been thought of as being kind of heralds of difficult times on Earth. And this year, we are supposed to have two comets that should be visible at least somewhat to the naked eye. And it's impossible for astronomers at this current time to say exactly how visible they will be. But two comets are scheduled to come past the sun, and their tails should become visible. One I know is supposed to be visible to the naked eye in October. Now, if this is a major comet sighting, the traditional thought is that it has some meaning on Earth, and the biggest thing that I see coming on Earth is more food wars, and maybe some food-related, drought-related problems out there.
Yeah, sometimes, there's also some of the conspiracy theorists that said that these bases on the moon and possibly on Mars are actually not alien at all, but they're sort of escape pods for some of the Earth elite, to put it in one way.
Well, there in fact may be, there definitely is a shadow government, and there may be a shadow space program. Yeah. I can't really say completely whether there is or not. A lot of people think there is, and the question would be on the shadow space program: is it operated entirely by humans, or is it a joint venture with aliens? And I don't think that we can exactly go there, but I doubt that any humans would want to spend the rest of their natural lives on the moon. I would sooner see them going underground, and I would sooner see, that the underground facilities are probably more to their liking. Although they're looking for people right now, Buzz Aldrin is looking for people who want to spend the rest of their lives on Mars. I understand it.
Well, okay for him, but I don't. Well, you know,
that's a whole extra subject. Getting back just to the moon briefly here.
Okay, sure.
You mentioned your friend seeing something passing over the moon. One would question whether he or she was looking through a telescope.
No.
And it sounds to me like if she was seeing something other than a satellite or a plane, it would most likely fall under the order of a fast walker, objects moving across the lunar disk, but apparently in space. There is another thing that is seen mostly by telescopes. These are called extralunar objects, or ELOs. Now, these are very, very interesting because they appear to be, one at first, if one was an astronomer, one might think at first this is some small object which is orbiting the moon, much as the moon is orbiting the Earth. There are different kinds of space junk out there that orbit the Earth, right? Mm-hmm. However, there's a real problem with this scientifically, and the Grail project sought to work on some of that. The fact that the moon is not equivalently gravitational in all places. Like the moon's gravity is wacky. In fact,
it's lumpy.
It's wacky, wonky, whatever.
Right,
but it's not.
Right.
It's not consistent. It's like some places it's a lot stronger than others. So it's very hard for an object to be caught in a lunar orbit as a result of that. Mm-hmm. So maybe the things that are extralunar objects, maybe they can be spacecraft from elsewhere. That's certainly a possibility.
Well, that too, and I'll tell you, just every so often the government really does come through, and NASA with the Grail did put on the web, and you can look this up, as these two satellites that we sent up to measure the gravity on the moon crashed into the moon. They took photographs videos, and so you can look at that and actually see what the moon would look like if you were orbiting past it at 6 mile distance. It's a pretty fascinating video. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, yeah.
But that was great. But I mean, just to get back to the moon bases and stuff, because, this is a UFO show, and we'd like to do the ooh thing.
Yes.
and you talked about Buzz Aldrin, and of course his buddy Neil Armstrong, who recently passed, and who you gave great honor to in your blog. And,
well, thank you. Yes, I find all the astronauts incredibly brave people.
And deservedly so. He especially. But just his transmission back was, NASA calls him Mission Control calling Apollo 11. And Apollo 11 responds, "These babies are huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there. They're lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They're on the moon watching us." Supposedly that transmission was picked up by a ham operator. However, to re-verify it, Maurice Chatelain, who was then the NASA Chief of Communications, claimed that astronaut Neil Armstrong viewed 2 UFOs resting on the rim of a crater. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, but nobody has talked about it until now. So, all this smoke, you just really have to suspect fire somewhere. And Neil Armstrong, what always surprised me about him, I mean, probably at the time of the lunar landing, the most famous human on Earth. And then he just goes away and becomes a professor of aeronautics or whatever at the University of Chicago and disappears. And
right.
I often wondered what it was that he saw up there.
Yeah, I do too, and it is also a kind of a sad thing with him because he was so brave and he was so smart, and the astronauts are America's were and are America's real heroes, and there's such a high bar to become an astronaut, and we. He wasn't properly honored towards the end of his life. I mean, I think to a certain extent he lacked some amount of health care that he felt that he needed. and he didn't get the millions of dollars that people in politics often get, let us say, for their contributions supposedly to corporations and so forth afterwards. He was a very humble man. He went back to a very humble life, but I'm saddened that the astronauts, after they retire from space, that they don't have they should have everything and anything they want, basically within reason, in my opinion.
Mine too. Kate Valentine, I'm speaking to Fahrusha. We're on 1160 WVNJ. Yeah, because there really aren't that many of them anyway. I mean, it's now there are. It's a much extended program, but as far as the original astronauts, yeah, they really. I mentioned to you in a phone conversation we had that I never really grasped how frightening it was until I saw there was a movie made. It was a documentary. It was actually sort of a videomentary, whatever they called it, Apollo 19, which was filmed as a documentary, but obviously was fake. And that was supposedly there was another moonshot. And when these guys landed on the moon, there was, as you said, an alien life form. It was in the shape of rocks, and they infected the capsule, and they had to be shot down before they landed back on Earth. That, for some reason, it wasn't done in a really terrifying, old-fashioned sci-fi way, but it was extremely scary, and it really made the point. These men had absolutely no idea what they were stepping off into. It
is an alien surface. The moon it's our closest neighbor, but it is not the Earth, and it's a whole lot. It's very far away in terms of the.
Help.
It's
no cell towers.
238,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And the Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter. So just think about that comparison for a second. I went down to the Kennedy Space Center, and I got into one of the early capsules that the astronauts went around the Earth in. You can actually get into it. And honey, it's a tin can,
I know.
It is actually, it's like being in an oversized tin can. It's not big at all. And of course, it's not made of tin. It's a steel, titanium reinforced thing. But it's still, the outer edge of it is not very thick.
Mm-mm.
And you're in space. You're miles above the Earth in space in a can. Come on. You got to be incredibly brave, and just to keep your mind straight under such duress. It's an amazing feat that cannot be underestimated. And I'm so angry when I hear people on TV or on the internet, say detrimental things about astronauts, and they have no idea. Mm-hmm. They have no idea, and it's so foolish.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree with you. I really do. Dale wrote in, too. He was wondering if we'd be able to photograph the far side of the moon. And,
yes.
He was wondering if that's been done. But
yes.
That has been done many times.
It has been done, and like I said, all those pictures are at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, out in, I guess it's near Van Nuys in in California. And you can order pictures of the far side of the moon. In fact, if you go to the Lunascan website, you can see the large picture of the far side of the moon, which is a composite image. And then there are places where you supposedly can click on it, and you will get taken down to a closer image. But most unfortunately, that appears to be broken. And I have no comment on that, only to mention that I've been out there trying to look at close-up images of the far side of the moon with lack of results. Though I'm certain they're out there, and maybe people can send in their pictures of such. But there are a few good websites out there that are non-governmental websites, and they have photos of the moon and look at moon anomalies in a way that's very open-minded, but not just fantasy. All right, And I want to just mention two or three of them,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, because it's...
One of them is this lunar scan. The other one is called MarsAnomalyResearch.com, and that's from J.P. Skipper. That we have the Cavaness Report, www.cavanessreport.com, and he has a large variety of paranormal phenomena listed there, but he has a very open-minded look at the moon and the moon sightings. And of course, locally we have Ken Pfeiffer and George Filer. Ken Pfeiffer has a worldufophotos.org, and he has a gallery called Ken's Discoveries and Info, and that takes pictures from the moon and makes circles around things that he feels might be anomalous,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that he's doctored the photos, though some of the pictures, might have some other explanations, but he's made an honest attempt to look at photographs from around the moon and find things that he feels are anomalous. So I'll make a listing of those and post them later today on your Kate Valentine UFO Show website, if I may.
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind. I really appreciate it. And we're just going to take yet another commercial break. Kate Valentine speaking with the very noted New York psychic, Fahrusha, Fahrusha, on 1160 WVNJ. We'll be right back. If you have any comments or questions, post them now. The website is AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. Be right back. Welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guest today is the New York psychic, Fahrusha. If you have questions for her or comments, you can post them now at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. One thing that I didn't want to cover before the hour is up is the fact that there's so much talk about our moon being hollow, and also and possibly an artificial satellite.
Yes.
And also that the moons of Mars, Phobos, Deimos, are also potentially hollow and artificial satellites. And I think that's pretty... You were actually the one that mentioned it to me. I hadn't ever heard it before.
Well, I think that there is a lot of interest from astronomers, especially Russians currently. I believe it's about Phobos and about it being an artificial satellite, and they've sent probes up there, and actual astronomers have posited why it may be hollow and artificial. As talking about our Luna, our moon, our satellite, the interesting facts about our moon are that it's very large in comparison to the Earth. It is the largest ratio size moon to a planet in the solar system. It's almost like a doubly orbiting planet in a certain sense, because the moon is 1/6 the size of the Earth, which is huge for a ratio for a satellite for a planet. Because we have some large moons orbiting Saturn and Jupiter, but the planets themselves are much huger. They're huge compared to the Earth. So, for a ratio, the moon is a huge satellite. Not only that, its particular orbit and distance from the Earth, it covers the sun almost exactly during the eclipses of the sun. And because of the moon being as close as it is and as big as it is, we have tides on the Earth, and the tides on the Earth make it possible for life as we know it. So the question becomes, is this a natural phenomena or not? And one can look at it both ways, because if life as we know it didn't develop, with the tides and the sea and so forth like that, which is made possible by the moon and its gravitation, then we wouldn't have life as we know it, but then we might have life as we don't know it. So this is a kind of a question that's almost impossible to answer given, the current state of the information.
Yeah, but again, you mentioned that some of these things that they sent to the moon, you were particularly annoyed that they sent a bomb there to explode.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Very angry about the lacrosse mission bombing the moon, because I don't think you have any business bombing a place you don't know what's going on there. You don't. Maybe you do know, but they're not telling us if they do know. But suppose there is an alien base on the moon, and you bomb it by accident. It could just have disastrous results. But beyond that, I have to go back to the idea that what is life? So is the moon itself alive, like the Earth is alive? I'm sure many of the listeners have heard of the Gaia hypothesis, which says that the Earth is a living being. By that I don't mean breathing, but living in a sentient manner, like having consciousness as living. And in that sense, the moon can have consciousness too. The heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, they can all have a form of consciousness, which is not to say, they grow like plants or rabbits, all right? Mm-hmm. But that they have consciousness and therefore are on some level alive. And do you go out, the people go out and bomb all kinds of things that they shouldn't be bombing. And one thing for sure you shouldn't be bombing is something you don't know what it is. Why bomb it? Just shows others out there what a violent group of angry, apes we are. Just fell out of the trees and beating each other up like crazy. And now we want to go out and beat up the aliens. I don't know.
Well, speaking of the aliens, certainly the talk of the reason that the Apollo missions did not continue is that we were warned off the moon and told not to go back there. So what do you think, though, really? I mean, I'm not holding you to it, but, certainly you've read a lot. You've been to tons of conferences. I
think it's suspicious, Kate. I think it's very suspicious because there are only 3 reasons not to go back to the moon. Mm-hmm. The first reason, which is most prominently given, is finances. Yeah. The second reason is that we were warned off or we found something we couldn't handle there. And the third reason doesn't make sense because it has to do with, like stopping for a while because that's all we could do. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, intellectually, that makes sense. Okay, you've flown somebody to the moon. Now what are you going to do with it? You can't mine there right away. You can't do a number of things. And so supposedly they went to doing these the shuttle-type missions with the space station. If the space station could be established, then you could hop from the space station to the moon. Mm-hmm. But you notice that never happened. And when they ended the moon program, they had a lot of people in training for it. So it's either incredibly short-sighted government policies where they already wasted loads of money training all these people to go to the moon, and then they didn't go, and they had like equipment and stuff that was semi-ready. But we also have to get back to the idea that using a chemical rocket, a rocket ship, probably isn't the way that other civilizations travel. Extraterrestrial civilizations travel through space. They don't go light years with a chemical rocket. Right. So the limitations of that could be discovered, have been, thought about more directly at that time. And I'm kind of making excuses for the ending of the space program, but I have to say that I do believe that it's highly likely that other beings have visited the moon. I would say that is in my thoughts, and I can't prove it. There's a lot of smoke, as you say. I can't prove it to people. But I would have to say that after careful reflection, it would seem to me that there have been visitors to other places in the solar system, non-human visitors to the Earth, to the moon, to Mars, and probably other planets.
Yeah, I sort of have to agree with you, and I think the moon would be a perfect parking lot. Perfect. It'd be funny if they found a big Easy Pass sign there.
Well, I would point people to these places on the internet that I have discovered, and I also would like to invite your listeners to post to your website photos of the far side of the moon that are detailed, and see if they can find them, because I've looked, and you see this general kind of stuff, but they have detailed photographs, and NASA's supposed to be a public, a public type entity, and yet we don't see these photographs of the far side of the moon that we'd like to in general circulation.
Well, Rob has said that he has just come across a video of some sort of a rocket leaving the moon, and he's going to post that on the website. But unfortunately, we're down to the last minute. So,
boy!
Yeah. No, you did great. Fahrusha, thank you again for taking the time to come on the show and share your thoughts and your knowledge with us. So please, again, let our listeners know how they can get in touch with you and your blog spot, which is fascinating.
Fahrusha.com and Fahrusha.wordpress.com.
Okay, thanks again. I really appreciate it. Be good. And as always, thanks to both Bill and Dave for your continuing support. Don't forget to support our sponsors. As always, the largest round of thanks goes out to you, our listeners. A wonderful weekend. We'll see you next Friday at 1. Our guest will be Rick Phillips. And until then, remember, keep your eye on the sky. Bye.